you are one of my inspirations for standing up. When I heard about, initially read about what you went through, you're one of several people that have been in a situation that I can empathize with. And, I thought to myself when I read it, I was like, if I was in that position, I, you know, I would have done the same thing. And you can't tell yourself something like that when you're confronted. So like, I kind of look at this as an opportunity, for all of us. And you know what? It has been an opportunity in a lot of ways, because it has connected me with some of the most amazing Americans I've ever met, including Jordan. And I feel like these people are going to be lifelong friends and brothers and sisters in arms. And, this situation has provided a litmus test, that has allowed us to separate the wheat from the chaff, and separate the people who, talk the talk and the people that can walk the walk. And, you are among the people in my life and your story and what you went through and the unbelievable pressure, because you had somebody in your face, and there are some of my colleagues in this vaccine mandate context that had the same thing happen. But, I just felt compelled to say that, because it's true. Your story and the stories of people like you inspired me to have the moral courage to do what I think is right. And I think that, what Sam Sigalov likes to say, he has it in his signature block, is courage is contagious. And so, same deal with him and Teresa Long. Like, those are individuals that I talked to that gave me motivation to begin speaking my mind.
Well, that's very nice to hear. It's a little uncomfortable, but let's use it, actually, because I think I can mine my own experience a little bit to figure out what it ought to imply to others who are trying to figure out what to do. One thing I will say is that your description of having been put in contact with extremely high quality people of excellent character, this is what happens when you do the difficult thing and you stand up, right? I have lost so many friends, but the upgrade in the quality of my interactions has been equally spectacular. It's very painful to lose the friends, the ones who don't stand by you and disappoint you. But the people who become your friends when you've stood up together are remarkable. And so if you focus on who you're going to lose, it'll keep you from doing the right thing. If you recognize, something fascinating happens to people who jump that gap, I promise it does. So I also wanted to say, people often talk to me about what happened at Evergreen, and I sometimes hear in what they say that they think highly of me because of the choice I made, and that really was not the experience. And I think there are some breadcrumbs here that people can follow. I never for a moment thought I had a choice, right? I put myself back in the situation, and I think I just don't have access to the circuit that would have done something different in that case. And I'm glad for that, right? It's lucky for me. Not having a choice in that situation is wonderful, because you won't screw it up, right? I don't know why I ended up that way, but I guess I'm hoping that we will recognize that is what a military is supposed to be, right? A military is supposed to be composed of people who their character and their training results in them not blinking at the point that they have to act, right? That's not a natural state. It's a difficult state to attain, but the defense of the nation and our principles depends on it. And to the extent that whatever our military has become has compromised that unflinching nature, it's time for a rethink, right? So anyway, thank you for saying what you said. I appreciate it. not having a choice means that some of it is not deserved, I think, because,
Well,
I just
Brett, that's what
did
living in the
what I
spirit
wanted to do.
is. In the Pauline Christian context, being justified, like that's what living in the spirit is. You know what the right thing to do is, and you don't have a choice. So, I mean, it's it's an exemplification of spiritual enlightenment. And I'm not blowing smoke. That's just how it is, and that's the way that I conceive of it, anyways.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I wonder. It's funny you describe yourself as an atheist, and I'm pretty close to one, and yet the terms you're using to describe where those characteristics come from borrow from a whole other language. But I do think what I experienced, if I'm honest with myself, the reason that I'm wired that way has to do with the fact that, I don't mean this psychologically, but I was very secure so that I wasn't, yes, I loved my job, but I didn't need it, right? I had skills. I could go do something else. I had a family that wasn't going to look askance at me if things didn't go well. And so anyway, the reason I raise it is I am very, very careful not to judge people who can't find their way there, because in many of their cases, their baseline is just far more vulnerable, right? So, and this actually goes to something that you were alluding to, Jordan. Actually, both of you have alluded to this. There is a kind of a cascade. You say, Grant, that courage is contagious. We've seen this. I think we've all seen it. But the point is, those of us who are in a position to say the right thing early make it safer for the next rung. People who are just somewhat less secure than we are, they can say the right thing, and they make it safer for people who are just a little bit less secure than they are. And that is how that contagiousness can actually turn the tide, is if each of us can muster the courage that is possible from our level of security to generate safety for others. We can bootstrap enough safety to make the system do the courageous thing. And that at the moment, I'm not especially hopeful based on what I've seen, but I certainly, that is my wish, is that happens quickly.
Yes, and actually that's something that we talk about is, the thing that is keeping the DoD from mandating these boosters is this line of defense that we have formed by pushing back on the original mandate. And so these people who got it thinking that they just had to get one shot or two shot and it would be done. I think that a lot of them, because I've heard from people, have realized that it is because so many have stood up and said this is unlawful and we're not going to comply. We're going to, push back against this. That is the reason why booster shots have not been mandated. And I think, given the time, it's been over a year since the DoD mandate was implemented, people are now awake to what has occurred. And so, you talked about losing friends. I hope that they know that you're not just fighting for yourself, you are fighting for them. And I think a lot of people have, come to realize that we are fighting, even if we don't agree with them, even if they say, we're wrong by not, protecting our neighbors and getting this shot, we are fighting for their rights to be able, when the next one comes down, God forbid, but for them to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, that's what it is to be a citizen of a nation, right? We don't fight for, those on our side of the political aisle. We fight for the nation as a whole, those who agree with us and those who disagree with us. And I do feel that way, that your right to informed consent is sacred, whether you intend to exercise it or just take the shot because some doctor told you should, right? You have that right. Whether you exercise it is your choice, but whether you have it is not. You have to have that right. And so, yes, we do fight for even those who oppose us. I did want to, some part of me doesn't want to say this, but your point about the boosters not having been mandated and that being a measure of the success of the resistance, I see this in the civilian world. I believe we have been very successful at raising awareness of the radical nature of these vaccines, the hazards to which they expose people, the possibility that there are alternative treatments, the fact that natural and innate immunity are your best defense if you're young and healthy. We've been very successful at creating that awareness, but the enemy fears nothing more than that success. And so what it does is it will bend over backwards to deny you the evidence of the impact you've had, right? It doesn't want others following that example, and it doesn't want you learning how to do it better next time. So it will pollute the data so that you can't see your impact. It will give credit to something else, so that you will feel that your effort was wasted. And the advice I would give you and anyone else listening who is in this battle is don't listen to it, right? Work backwards from the change in the world that you can see. And, be careful. Don't over extrapolate from the change. But to the extent that people are not lining up for boosters in the civilian world and the military is not mandating them, that is a strong indication that what you have been doing is well worth it. All right. Is there more that either of you want to say before we close this out?
I would just like to push back a tiny bit on the consideration of security and spiritual awareness. When I was put in a position, 12 years in a position where I feel like I'm finally able to make the impact that I wanted to make, doing something that I think is important, which is trying to maximize the human performance of soldiers. Not necessarily so that they're more lethal. That's a logical consequence of them being healthy and fit, and being able to find their own purpose and having the skills they need to achieve that purpose. When I was put in that position, a part of the religious accommodation process is you go through and, there are a bunch of questions on your faith and then, detailed questions. And reflecting back, a lot of us had suicidal ideation. Like I did. I'm not the only one. And, but something good can come of that in what's called post-traumatic growth. So I feel like I had some spiritual growth, some post-traumatic spiritual growth. And going through that experience, I would say, just like in your position where you said you didn't have a choice, were you sitting there and thinking about, actually, I'll be okay if I don't lose my job? You weren't thinking about any of that. It was already done because you had achieved that level of spiritual awakening where you know what the right thing to do is, and you're going to do it, and you're going to face the consequences. And yes, some people are in positions where if they speak up, they are taking on a higher amount of risk. That is unquestionable. And relatively speaking, because I have a professional degree, I'm probably taking on less risk than, say, somebody that's a pure combat arms person with 15 years of service. That's depending on that retirement. But nevertheless, that spiritual acknowledgement of doing the right thing and being committed to that and accepting the consequences, it's parallel to and outside of a consideration for the material consequences of doing the right thing. Once you commit that that's what you're going to do, and that's the path that you're on in life, and that you'll accept the consequences. Like a lot of people, if you believe in an afterlife and have traditional religious beliefs, it can make a little bit more sense about heaven and so on and so forth. But for me, it's life. What kind of life do you want to live? And do you want to truly live while you're alive? And the only way to do that is by staying true to yourself. And if the consequences of that are incredibly painful, then so be it. We don't know the future. We can't know the future. It's always speculative. So if you waste cognitive resources sitting around and thinking about what could go wrong if you do the right thing, you're not there yet. And if you want to get there, you just have to recognize that you don't know the future, and you might be surprised as to what the future might hold for you if you do the right thing, regardless of the consequences, as long as you're doing the right thing in accordance with what you believe and know in your heart.
That's very well said. And you put something together for me that I hadn't realized before, which is when I say I had no choice, you're right. The answer is none of that was going through my mind at the time because I had already decided who I was and what I was going to do. So there was nothing to decide in that moment, which does strike me as, a military mindset, right? You train for it so that when it actually happens in front of you, how you will react is already, a settled question. Jordan, did you have anything you wanted to say in closing?
I just wanted to encourage the audience, that the military is still an institution for good. There are still amazing commanders fighting within the system. And there are many who have, like you stated earlier in the podcast, have come to realize, that they were wrong and are working to correct, and remedy really what's been going on. And I would just ask, for the American people to help us by contacting representatives. We're changing hearts and minds all the time. Thank you so much for having us on here to share our testimony and what we've encountered, throughout the last 2 years, really. But we need the help of the American people. There's a historical number of lawsuits filed by military members. It's never been done before. And I think that that's a testament to how strongly we feel and and how convicted we are that we are right, and that we are standing up for our constitutional rights and the constitutional rights of all Americans.
Yeah, I think the opportunity here to return the favor to a force that protects us from all sorts of things, which we don't have to think about because they don't threaten us, right? A functional military is something that frees us citizens to do other important things. And your jeopardy is not something we can allow ourselves to turn away from. I will say I appreciate your thanking me for the opportunity, but I don't see it that way. I see this as my obligation to my nation, and also my obligation to people who are threatened because they have honorably signed up to protect the country, and that has exposed them to a force that has more power over them than the federal government has over the rest of us. So in any case, I hope that hearing you and understanding your mindset, what has motivated you to stand up, what you have faced, I hope that wakes people up not only to your predicament, but to what it suggests about the moment in history that we all share. And, so far, although COVID has revealed many bright spots, it has brought people to public attention who I truly think are of excellent character, both of you among them. I also think it has been a massive setback for the values that we paid so dearly for. But it would be wonderful if that setback awakened people to the value of opportunities that they take for granted, and if they became consciously grateful for them and acted to protect them. The number one way they can do that is by recognizing that the military mandates are unjust and must be reversed. And anyway, I hope it happens, and I hope that we have contributed to it happening here today.